so much. Now we will listen to Professor Dr. Nurten Sarıca. I would like to read her biography. She is a professor at Pamukkale University, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Department of French Language and Literature. After completing his undergraduate education at Atatürk University, she completed her master's and doctorate studies in the field of linguistics at Sorbonne Nouvelle Paris III University in Paris, France. Although her studies are focused on linguistics, language acquisition, discourse analysis, and pragmatics, she also has studies on French language and literature. She also has research and studies in the field of semiotics. She participates in studies within Turkish Semiotic Society and follows them closely. Nurten Sarıca is the author of many academic works related to semiotics, including books, book chapters, editorials, and articles. She has many publications in these research fields. I leave the floor Professor Dr. Nurten Sarıca to make her presentation titled Children's Drawings as Domain of Exercise of Semiotic Function and its Aesthetic Appreciation.
Thank you, Betül. Dear colleagues, dear professor and participants, first of all, I would like to thank our valuable professor who prepared this online congress. My student and I will present to you the paper on children's drawings as a semiotic function area and their aesthetic evaluation. Now I will share my presentation. Okay. Okay. In this study, the importance of drawing, which is one of the semiotic function areas of communication in children, the aesthetic aspects of drawings and how children communicate through drawing will be discussed. Children communicate with their environment in many ways. Apart from communication with language, they try to express themselves through their behaviors, games, and music. Another way of communication is painting. Piaget saw drawing as an effort to represent the outside world, so he considered drawings as the emergence of mental images. Children also communicate with those around them through their drawings. They translate their imagination into reality through pictures which are a simple means of expression are of great importance in helping the child reflect himself and express his feelings and thoughts about events. As a communication tool or a sign mediating communication, painting or drawing reveals a semiotic function because, as Leo and Meyer pointed out in 2021, it's possible to understand what the paintings are telling and what they mean through both the place of reference and inference. The picture can also be a sign of the child's mental development in which he conveys his inner world. His drawings are a guide of following the child's thoughts and mental development. Thanks to the picture, which looks like an ordinary activity in daily life, maybe a game, very important information about the child can be obtained. It is not easy to make sense of lines that seem complicated at first glance. However, drawings which contain much more information than they seem allow us to discover the invisible part of the iceberg by reflecting how the child perceives his environment, his relationship with the outside world, the bond between him and adults, and his problems, if any. There are many studies in the literature on drawing development. These studies were discussed in Yauzer 1995, and leading or pioneering names include Goodenough, Luquet, Piaget, Lursa, McCarthy, Friedomont, Neville, Arnold, and Lowenfield. And now I leave the word to my student to present the rest.
Thank you, Ms. Sarja. Dear sir and madams, now I will go on the presentation. Historically, it can be seen that children's drawing, which was a subject of educational, philosophical, and then psychological analysis in the 20th century, influenced those working in these fields at the beginning of the 20th century. As art historian Emmanuel Pernot shows in the invention of children's drawing, this was a period when art was considered sacred and led to the recognition of children's drawings as an art in their own right. According to the author, the drawings were fascinating because they knew no boundaries, and formlessness is actually a form that escapes our attention. For this reason, many artists at that time collected children's drawings and made collections, and they were considered as rediscovered works in which it was possible to transfer everything to drawing because it knew no boundaries. In order to determine the stages of development of children's drawings, researchers such as Kirchensteiner, Ruma, and Lücke examined thousands of pictures they collected. In 2022, Newell argues that graphic activity begins before the semiotic function in the child. In fact, leaving a trace on a support firstly corresponds to a sensory motor exercise without representative intention. The drawing movement consists of drawing random circles and lines on paper or another object. Lucke examined children's drawings from an early age and later identified the stages that would contribute to Piaget's work. In his study in 1927, he listed the developmental stages of children's drawings as follows. First, pure scribbling. Second, interpretive scribbling. Third, failed realism. Fourth, mental realism. And finally, the fifth, visual realism. From the age of 18 months onwards, the drawing phase is the pure scribbling phase. In this stage, the child draws random lines on the paper. In the beginning, since the child does not have enough hand and finger strength, he or she cannot hold the pencil properly, and the drawings are haphazard. These lines are initially uncontrolled and meaningless. This is a discovery for the child and an accomplished action. The child attributes his own meanings to the lines. The accomplished action shows a desire to continue, and this action is repeated until it becomes a skill and becomes a pleasure. However, over time, with mental development, hand-eye coordination and control improve and the drawings begin to make sense. The child attributes meanings to his or her drawings, but their interpretations are incidental. This stage constitutes the interpretive scribbling stage. Interpretive scribbles begin at the age of 3 or 4. At this stage, the drawings take certain forms. The child succeeds in drawing circles, notices the shapes he makes, and begins to explore them. He comments on his drawings over time. At this stage, the semiotic function reveals itself. Because when the child interprets his drawings, he tells them what they are and what they represent. He notices the details of objects and tries to convey them with his lines. Towards the end of this period, primitive depictions appear in children's paintings. The child now begins to examine the parts of the objects and transfer them to his drawing. The first figure that stands out in this period is the human figure, but this figure is quite simple and incomplete. Although the child starts drawing determinedly around the age of 5, drawing disjointed lines and not being able to form a whole is an indication of the failed realism phase. A child who starts making representative drawings sometimes cannot combine the parts of the drawing. For example, He can draw eyes or arms outside the body. Human figures in the form of stick men, as well as figures with cephalopods and arms, are also noteworthy. The face is usually drawn from a front profile and expressionless. Hence, it can be fingered or fingerless. In some examples, it is seen that the body part is exaggerated. As the age progresses, the neck, fingers, ears, and pupils are added to the picture. The ratio between body parts varies, and it becomes more realistic. The child does not try to draw the object exactly. Those drawings are noticeable and during this period. The fourth stage identified by Luque is the mental reality stage. This period is also called the pre-scheme period. It generally covers the age after 5 years. Starting from this age, children begin to draw what they know, not what they see, and to convey whatever is in their minds. In this respect, children's drawings give adults an idea about the child's thoughts, feelings, and how they perceive the environment. This is a period when the child's emotions are more dominant. The figures depicted are understandable, but the size of the objects and their connection with the space are big. The child may exaggerate details that are important to him or her. At this age, he deals with symbols, and over time, child in this period begins to see the difference between the real appearance of things and his own schemas. Since the child in this period does not pay attention to the direction and relationship between objects, he may draw some figures upside down. Gradually, symbolic images reveal themselves. In order to make sense of such pictures, it may be necessary to ask the child what he is drawing or ask him to explain. The last stage, which is visual realism, is the period in which the child draws what he or she sees from his or her own point of view and covers ages 8 and above. The pictures may become more detailed and realistic. Colors are no longer chosen randomly. The child wants to color objects in their true colors. At this stage, the concept of space stands out in the paintings. While the previously drawn figures appear to be flying in the air, they are now positioned spatially on a certain ground. The human figure becomes more proportionate, realistic, and abundantly detailed. The child begins to show gender discrimination in his pictures, starting from the age of 6 to 8. Apart from this, Ilzar quotes Kellogg in 1995 and mentions that the child's pleasure in painting is divided into two, as motor and visual pleasure. Accordingly, the child's first scribbles express his motor pleasure, and the satisfaction he feels while looking at the scribbles expresses his visual pleasure. Children first try to paint interesting basic forms, and no matter what culture the children come from, their paintings include circles, crosses, and simple shapes, says Kellogg, and talks about the existence of an innate universal order in children's paintings. From this point of view, artistically, children's paintings are divided into three according to him. First, basic scribbles, second, placement patterns, and third, diagrams. Usually, towards the age of 2, meaningless basic scribbles are replaced by proportional drawings that take into account the boundaries of the paper on which the picture is drawn. At the age of 3, he begins to draw shapes, such as circles and triangles. The beginning of circular drawings leads to the development of the child's perception of form and the formation of designs of meaningful shapes. The development of drawing in children requires a certain process, just like language acquisition. During the babbling period, which is the first stage of language acquisition, children make meaningless sounds. Over time, sound repetitions become meaningful in certain situations and opposition occurs. Before they start the scribbling stage in drawing, children like to leave marks on some objects with their wet fingers. For instance, while walking on the sand by the sea, footprints make them happy. He can draw a line with a piece of wood in the sand and interpret it as making a road. Then they draw lines and dots on paper haphazardly and aimlessly. Since their hand and finger muscles are not yet sufficiently developed, they cannot even hold the pen properly. However, as their ability to hold objects develops with small muscle development, they also show increasing success in holding a pen. This development is also reflected in his drawings, the lines becoming more and more regular, and the photo below illustrates this situation. In picture 1, the child you can see in the photo is just starting to draw a page of tree and holds the pen from above. The child, who could not even make sense of his own drawings at first and was angry about it, now begins to compare his lines to objects and makes his own interpretations. While he has words, he tells his drawings and tries to draw what he describes. It is at this time that the child begins to form his first words and first sentences. By experimenting, the child's hand-eye interaction also increases, and he draws stiff lines, oblique lines, zigzags, and circles by directing his pencil as he wishes. All these drawings go from complex to organized. Pictures that are drawn as if they are flying, nested and on paper without any concern for placement, begin to be drawn separately. After points, lines, and circles, angular drawings also manifest themselves. Kellogg, who examined the drawings of 8,000 children, stated in his book Analyzing Children's Art that they generally consist of 20 basic forms of scribbles. Yozart summarized these scribble shapes in a table as follows. In this table, you can see 20 scribbles, different scribbles such as point, single vertical line, single horizontal line, single diagonal line, single curved line, multiple vertical lines, multiple horizontal lines, multiple diagonal lines, multiple curved lines. In scribble 10, you may see half bent open line, and it goes on with half bent closed line. In 12, you may see zigzag or wavy line. It goes with single circle line, multiple circle lines, and in the 5th scribble, it is seen that there is a spiral line, overlapping spiral lines, overlapping open spiral line, and in scribble 18, you may see open circle line, single intersecting circle, and lastly, imperfect circle. Kellogg's table of scribble varies, quoted by Yoza in 1995. As seen in the table, the child's drawing adventure begins with dots and continues with vertical, horizontal, curved lines, zigzags, and multiple lines. Then it continues in the form of spiral lines and imperfect circles. Another similar table in Kellogg's book is shown below. In this picture, it is shown that the circular shapes that follow the first scribbles gradually transform into human figures and a drawing of the stick figure. Now, we will mention drawing as a tool of communication. Considering the first drawings began between 18 to 24 months, it can be said that children prefer to draw as an easy means of communication in communicating with their environment, while still having a limited vocabulary at that time. Drawing relaxes the child, allows him to express himself, and develops a sense of confidence. On the one hand, the child transfers his inner world to paper with his drawings. On the other hand, he enables those around him to have information about him and get to know him. Where words are not enough to describe, drawings mediate our understanding of the child's emotional world. Understanding the communication that children establish through drawings gives us a deeper understanding of children's mental and psychological state and their personalities. Sometimes, at first glance at the child's picture, it is understandable that he has feelings while making the picture. If the drawing has a depressing or disturbing image, a negative impression of the child's thoughts can be obtained. For example, if there are intense scribbles, this may indicate that the child is angry about something. If the child is making a car sound with his mouth while scribbling, what he is trying to draw may be a car, or he may be trying to draw a car driving on the road. So, the line that seems meaningless to the adult may have a lot of meaning for the child. A smiling, radiant sun on the paper is a sign of a harmonious, happy, contented child. The picture below is a good example of this. In the second picture, you can see a 3-year-old child's drawings. Here, the smiling sun in the upper left corner and the scribbles at the bottom represent sunlight. The child's stick figures, which means stick men, usually represent his family or people with whom he feels closest. He draws his favorites close to himself. The largest drawn one represents the most important person for him. In the picture below, the child is trying to describe her closeness to her mother. This drawing belongs to a 3.5-year-old child. The little one is herself, and the big one is her mother. The more details a child adds to the drawing, the better his cognitive ability is developing. Children will usually add details like spectacles on the father or a skirt on the mother. Children with acute observation may even be able to notice and interpret physical appearance differences, and may even be able to see gender differently. In the picture below, Arden, a 4 years old, noticed that his grandfather wears glasses, so he reflected this in his drawing. Now, in picture 4, you can see a picture drawn by a 4-year-old child. Technical detail is sign of cognitive development. Now, in this part, we will discuss aesthetic evaluation. There is no specific age period in which aesthetic development begins. When objects and shapes are seen in harmonious relationships with each other, and when thinking, feeling, and meaning are realized, a development is made in terms of aesthetic sensitivity. If feelings and thoughts are expressed in an order, an aesthetic value emerges. In order to examine the aesthetic aspect of drawing development, the theoretical framework of which we discussed below, a corpus consisting of the paintings of 5 children, aged from 2 to 5, was created. The pictures in this corpus were evaluated in terms of aesthetics, that is, line shape, color, face perception, positioning, and proportion features, according to the order of drawing development. Below are a few examples that we have selected from the corpus, showing the first stage of drawing development. Now,
Sorry, I want to remind that you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, the picture 5 is drawn by 3 years and 3 months old child. In this drawing, consisting of dots and dashed lines, a nameless and random drawing style can be seen. The child is not yet proficient in holding a pencil. Drawing creates motor and visual pleasure for him. The scribbles that children make unconsciously at first become controlled in parallel with their development. There is a complex image in the middle of the paper. In picture 6, which belongs to a 2 years and 4 months old child. This picture shows the child's transition from dots and dashed lines to continuous circular lines in the pure scribbling phase. It is also a sign of cognitive progress. An aesthetic effect cannot yet be mentioned regarding the use of color and positioning. Picture 7 belongs to a 3 years and 6 months old child. This picture is also an example of spiral line experiments. It has a more colorful appearance than the previous ones. The colors are completely optional and emotional. These drawings, which adults call scribbles, can represent an object or a person for the child. Again, it is a scribbling phase, but this time there are dense scribbles at the bottom of the paper, indicating the development of spatial perception. It can be considered as an attempt to create order on paper. Apart from the scribbles, the first shapes seen are continuous semicircles, circles, or round, because this is how the child begins to make a human figure. This is an indication of his mental development and his mental awareness of those around him mentally. Even though the circles are not very smooth, he expresses what he draws with his own interpretation. Thus, the child shows that he is now in his interpretive scribble or meaningful scribble phase. The examples reflecting this period are below. As can be seen at this stage, the doodles cease to be aimless and uncontrolled and begin to turn into conscious lines. Around the age of 3, the child begins to draw the first human figure as a single round, that is a head, because the first part that the child perceives is the head. At first, the eyes are drawn first and then the mouth. When the child is 3.5 years old, he has a second round as the body. Parts such as arms, legs, fingers, and feet are added to this body in front of lines. In this picture, the downward lines added only to the head represent the legs, and the sideways lines represent the arms. As the child progresses in drawing and mental development, the details in the pictures begin to increase. Parts such as hair, teeth, neck are among the features of the 4-year-old picture. Thus, the child enters the stage of reality in the picture. However, he may draw the eyes outside rather than inside the head, or he may draw the arm lines out of connection with the body. In this case, it is called phased realism indice. Aesthetic elements such as the use of color, perception of space and proportion begin to show themselves in the paintings. The drawings of 4-year-old child and 4.5-year-old child below are good examples of this transition. And lastly, these last pictures show the child's drawing development processes and the child's artistic aesthetic development in this process. At first, simple scribbles later turned into meaningful shapes. Ordinary circles represent the human figure, simple lines represent parts of a body. If the child's drawing ability develops, it is possible for him to develop above his age and make more beautiful drawings. In example 14, as in Joyce's drawing, while she drew her mother and herself in this painting, she also reflected an aesthetic element in her painting by transferring the color harmonies to her painting in a realistic way. She dyed her mother's hair blonde, just like in reality. Another example of aesthetic development can be seen in the painting of 4-year-old boy. Here, he reflected his spatial perception by placing the child's drawing proportionally on paper. In conclusion, drawing has a very special place for children. Even if they are made in a childish manner, primarily for the sole purpose of gaining pleasure and developing certain movements, they are more effective as a means of communication. Apart from this, it can also be considered as a sign of the child's cognitive development and the external expression of his inner world. Children's drawings can be defined as the embodiment of the images in the child's mind. In this respect, by transferring his own feelings and thoughts to paper, he gives information about himself to those around him and ensures their understanding. The lines that adults see as insignificant scribbles say a lot about the child. Color confusion, dense lines, larger or smaller shapes reflect what the child is experiencing in his inner world and clues about his feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. For this reason, children's drawings carry very important meanings behind what they appear to be. With this examination of children's paintings in the process of covering the first two stages of painting development, which generally starts around the age of 2 and continues until the age of 12 to 13, and the range of 4 to 5 years, we have observed how the child develops mentally along with his drawings and how he passes from pure scribble to the meaningful and interpretive scribble stage and then to the reality stages. Although the developmental stages are divided into certain age ranges, they may differ due to the individual physical and cognitive characteristics of children. Although there is no conformity to aesthetic rules in children's paintings as in adults, it cannot be said that they are completely devoid of aesthetics. If the child is supported in painting and provided with sufficient opportunities, his development will be better and his creativity will increase. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and sorry for time.